Committed so much, sacrificed so much, not only for our party, but for our country. We're now going to hear an introduction to our outgoing leader, but a few words as well to a man who I respect more than almost everybody else, my immediate predecessor, who guided our party as chairman for 6 years, 6 very long, difficult years. As my tenure as chairman is going to last approximately 6 or 7 weeks, I can only begin to imagine how he feels to have now given it over. Ladies and gentlemen, he deserves huge praise and applause for everything he's done. Could I ask you please to show that appreciation for Steve Crowther?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That's a lovely welcome. Good morning. I have to say, when Paul first asked me to speak at this conference, I was quite uneasy about it, because having been involved in organising quite a lot of conferences, I realised I don't actually fit my own criteria. But he insisted that he wanted me to be here to really to introduce our next speaker, so here I am. I then started getting a bit overexcited, and I thought, oh wow, this is my last big opportunity. I shall make a groundbreaking speech. And I thought, well, who am I kidding? I've always kept a bit of a low profile, as you know, in my role as chairman. In fact, I have so little public profile that there's at least one member of the NEC that thinks I work for the security services. And in fact, last November I looked up the betting odds for the next leader of UKIP, and I found that Giles Brandreth has a better chance than I do. So I'm just really here to say goodbye and thank you, really to all of you, to give a few words of advice, such as they are worth, on what UKIP I think needs to do next, and hand over to the man you've all really come to hear. Before we go any further, who was at the conferences in Derby at the end of July? Hands up. So what is it we all have to keep reminding ourselves? We won! That's correct, we won. Thank you, we'll come back to that later. When Nigel approached me in 2010 and asked me if I would take on the role of party chairman in the rather likely event that he was re-elected leader, what he actually said to me in what I think it must be the worst job ad ever was, "I'm going to ruin your life." In fact, he gave me the most precious opportunity of my life, and that's the opportunity to contribute in a very minor way to the momentous events that culminated on June the 23rd in our changing the course of our country's history. I've been the chairman of UKIP and its National Executive Committee now for twice as long as any previous incumbent. And I've depended on many people in that time, but I'd like to say a special word of thanks. I'm not going to thank everybody because the list would be far too long, but I'd like to say a special word of thanks to Paul Oakden, also to Adam Richardson and John Bickley in particular for their fantastic work over the last 2 years, and for enabling me to enjoy my summer while they were left holding the dirty end of the baby. I'd like to say a quick word about the NEC, if I may. The NEC has come in for a lot of stick in the last few months. Some of it's justified and some of it isn't. Before you sweep away what you have, you need to make sure you know what you're getting rid of and also what you're going to get in its place. The Constitution that we put in 2011 deliberately sets up a delicate power balance between the elected leader and the elected NEC, with the chairman appointed to keep the peace. Like the great powers before the First War, constant diplomacy is needed to keep that balance from tipping into a mutually destructive conflict. The job is to avoid a Balkan tinderbox setting the whole thing off. The NEC is not perfect, but for 5 of my 6 years as chairman, its members were generally, with a couple of exceptions, a delight to work with. Conscientious, collegiate, courteous, and dedicated to supporting the party's progress. Over the past year, unfortunately, it has become more of a crucible for the pursuit of personal grudges against senior party members and staff, and some factional fighting. But the majority of NEC members have been exasperated by it. So reform is certainly overdue, and the regional model, which has been talked about, and Paul talked about earlier on, may now have found its time. But the most important thing of all is that UKIP, under its new leader, gets its house in order quickly, reforms the columns of the People's Army, and is back in battle order without delay. Because the country needs UKIP, strong, unified, cohesive and determined, now more than ever. And the reason is because British democracy is in some respects on trial for its life. So what happened on the 23rd of June? Yeah, we didn't win some by-election. We didn't win a European Parliament seat under PR. We didn't fight 6 other people to get a council seat with 28% of the vote. We won the largest popular vote in the history of this country. The 17.4 million votes for Leave was way more than Margaret Thatcher got in 1979, or even John Major's record 14 million in 1992. How did he do that? It was more than the Yes campaign got in 1975, which kept us in the EEC for the next 40 years. With 33.5 million people voting in a straight choice between Leave and Remain, it was the biggest exercise in popular democracy this country has ever seen. As Tony Benn said, after being on the losing side in the 1975 referendum, when the British people speak, everyone, including members of Parliament, should tremble before their decision. But it was close, wasn't it? No, not really. The margin was 1.27 million. Leave gained 52% of the vote. No government has been elected on as high a vote share as that in this country since Stanley Baldwin in 1931. What's more, if you look at the result on a constituency basis, Leave won 421 seats out of 650. That's a majority of 229. That is 50 more than Tony Blair had in the 1997 landslide. In England and Wales, 73% of seats voted Leave. So that's settled then, isn't it? Well, you certainly think so. But then we hear that some people have decided that it isn't. The man who is currently trying to make Jeremy Corbyn look like a competent leader of the Labour Party, Owen Smith, says that if he gets to be Prime Minister, he won't allow Brexit. Or maybe he'll apply to rejoin the EU and the Euro. Fortunately, the chances of Mr. Smith becoming Prime Minister are vanishingly small, despite his glittering career as a BBC producer, a special advisor to Ed Miliband's Labour Party, and a lobbyist for various pharmaceutical companies, even if he settles on a coherent policy position which doesn't involve trying to outflank Comrade Corbyn from the left. But then we hear that someone called Tim Farron, who apparently leads the Liberal Democrats, demands that for the sake of democracy, we need to have a second referendum on the terms of the negotiation. What will be the question in this referendum, I ask myself? Do you agree with the terms proposed for Brexit? Place a cross in the relevant box for A, yes, B, no, C, it depends, D, some of them, E, most of them, F, please write in your alternative ideas for the treaty in more than 3,000 words. Dear, oh dear. But it isn't just politicians on the make who are banging this drum. And to be fair, I would like to pay tribute to most politicians on the Remain side who have recognised, like Tony Benn, that when the British people speak, everyone should tremble before their decision. The thing is that the gilded elite in this country has signalled that it simply isn't prepared to let the ignorant, uneducated plebs get away with taking away its pet project for world loveliness. And the standard bearer for this legion of the intellectual elite is one Baroness Patience Wheatcroft of Blackheath. The Baroness, who used to edit the Wall Street Journal Europe, among other things, has surreally redefined British democracy and announced that what's needed is a peers' rebellion to kick out the Brexit bill when it comes to the House of Lords. Now, I'm generally a mild-mannered, polite, respectful sort of chap. I believe in the monarchy, the House of Lords, our tradition of civil and individual rights, law and order, parliamentary democracy and respect for our institutions. But, Baroness, I have to tell you, not only is your plan a suicide note for the House of Lords, it's a blueprint for the destruction of democracy in this country. Because the plebs voted for something you don't like, you propose to tell them they can't have it. And the very fact that a senior Conservative peer, a former editor of the Sunday Telegraph, could possibly advance this view shows that UKIP's oft-heard and oft-derided cry about the elite stealing democracy from the people is absolutely bang on the money. And that's why UKIP's continuing strength is so vital. How long have I got? A minute ago. All right. Okay. Well, I'll carry on then. The interesting thing about the Baroness's title, being Baroness Wheatcroft of Blackheath, is, of course, Blackheath is where all the revolting peasants gather when they come and march on London. Wat Tyler in 1381, Jack Cade's Kentish men in 1450, the Cornish rebels in 1497, all gathered on Blackheath to make London tremble. And though I am happily, very happily, now withdrawing from day-to-day politics, if, Baroness, after the good folk of this country have given their view, if you and your chums attempt to overturn the will of the people as expressed in the largest exercise in direct democracy ever held in this country, I shall be happy to join the Cornish, the Kentish, the peasants from every county in the country, including and especially the Welsh, and be on her doorstep in Blackheath with flaming torches before she can call a Uber cab to escaping. Ladies and gentlemen, as William Shakespeare wrote in Twelfth Night, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. The rest of us can but hope to one day be offered the opportunity to serve a great man or woman. Because in politics these days, except in the Labour Party, it's as likely to be a woman. According to some new research, working-class voters are repelled by posh MPs who seem to have nothing in common with them. And it has been hilariously baffling to politicians of every other party in recent years that the son of a stockbroker, educated at Dulwich College, who worked in the city on the metals exchange, has shiny shoes, an immaculate tie, and dresses for every occasion like an ad from the Tatler circa 1982, could possibly be appealing to the working man and woman of this country. But what the voters saw in Nigel and in UKIP was not politics, but truth. In fact, one of Nigel's biggest flaws as a politician, and greatest strengths, is his Tourette's-like urge to say what he thinks on all occasions. Until recently, people in the media gleefully replayed whatever they considered Nigel's gaffes to the public at every opportunity, in the belief that they were putting people off him. It took them some years to understand that that was exactly what made ordinary people want to vote for him. And by then it was too late. Nigel said what he thought and what a huge number of ordinary people were thinking for themselves and were fed up with him being made to feel guilty about. I mean, I know he is a bit demob happy right now, but who wouldn't vote for a party leader who described George Osborne in the Times as a despicable, pasty-faced bastard and a weasel? I would like to thank Nigel.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.